Hey, this is Kez, and this is Nightmares at Midnight.
Do I look abominable to you?
We all go a little mad sometimes.
I see dead people.
He's alive!
Congratulations, you are still alive.
What's the boogeyman?
As a matter of fact, it was.
Well, whatever you do, don't fall asleep. I'm your number one fan. There's nothing to worry about. You're gonna be just fine. I'll take good care of you. I'm your number one fan.
All right, welcome back, and thanks for tuning back in to Nightmares at Midnight. I'm Kaz, like the intro said. I am the main host here, and I do most of the episodes on my own, but I do occasionally have my husband Will or Violet in here with me, and occasionally you'll hear a grunt or groan or babble in the background. That's Yeti. She is just about 4 months old now, so you might hear her in the background. I have her in the pod lab with me, so just forgive those background sounds for me. Today we are going to continue with our states series. We've done Connecticut already, we've done Arizona already, and we're going to roll today to find out what state we are doing and go from there. So let me get my dice and let's figure it out. Okay, so today we are doing Montana. I'm going to keep with kind of the tradition that we were doing last episode with the abandoned hospitals and that kind of thing. I think asylums and hospitals kind of have a very spooky vibe to them in general. And then when you throw in urban legends about the tortured souls of the damned wandering the halls, you have the ghost stories and the sounds that you hear, that it's pretty easy to have a myth that might just continue itself over the decades. Pretty easy. So we're going to talk about the Montana State Hospital, established by the territorial government in 1877, pretty much a dozen years before Montana attained statehood. The Montana State Hospital was the state's lengthiest operating publicly administered psychiatric institution. Nestled in an unincorporated community within Deer Lodge County, the facility initially aimed to provide compassionate care for the mentally ill. However, over time, it changed into a site known for quite the abuse. In 1924, the hospital gained notoriety when it came to light that 11 patients had undergone forced sterilization without their consent. Justification for this inhumane practice was framed under the disguise of eugenics, with the hospital staff asserting its necessity for Montana's future and claiming approval from the authorities. A total of 256 individuals were sterilized through Montana's eugenics program from 1923 to 1954. That's crazy. In case you're unaware of what eugenics is, because I had to look it up, I had heard it before. I know of one specific instance of eugenics being used, but I looked it up just so that way I could explain it. It's the study of how to arrange reproduction within a human population to increase the occurrence of heritable characteristics regarded as desirable. So that was the definition of it. It was developed by Sir Francis Galton, and the only other time I had heard of this was by Nazis, which is a very American answer. It was in order to justify the treatment of the Jews, disabled people, and other minority groups. Basically, they used eugenics to create the Aryan race, which had pale skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes, and they viewed any other race as impure and evil. While the Nazis took eugenic attitudes to the extreme by murdering approximately 300,000 disabled people in Germany, From 1939 to 1945, eugenic ideas and actions in the United States preceded the rise of Nazism and continued after its demise. I don't think that a lot of Americans know that. I think we associate eugenics with Nazis, kind of like how I did, but don't realize that it was happening on our own territory too. Eugenics made its way from the lectures and writings of scientists and medical professionals into various public and private realms across the nation, including marriage, reproduction, education, healthcare, child welfare, and care of the mentally ill, which brings us back full circle. To me, the Montana State Hospital was using the practice as a cover for wanting to take out the mental illness from the community, which basically that's what eugenics is they're scientifically making the community different by controlling who is reproducing. So back to the hospital. By the 1950s, the hospital faced issues of overcrowding and understaffing. Seems to be pretty typical in the early 1900s of understaffing and overcrowding. They subjected approximately 2,000 patients to substandard living conditions, also seems to be a trend. The institution included its own farm, barns, and greenhouse where patients were compelled to work and produce sustenance. The premises also hosted 2 cemeteries, which is still there, where deceased patients were laid to rest in unmarked graves. So not only are we taking away their dignity by sterilizing them, we're also putting them in unmarked graves. I can't justify the treatment of people like that. The hospital, being made of both a historic structure and more contemporary facilities, is believed to be haunted by the lingering spirits of former patients and staff. Well, yeah, I feel like after that many people have died, I'm sure their energy is still there. Reported paranormal phenomena include auditory experiences like voices, screams, moans, and laughter, which I don't know about you, but if I'm sitting in a hospital or if I'm exploring an abandoned place and I hear laughter, I'm going to freak out. Visual sightings of apparitions, shadows, and orbs, especially prevalent in the basement and the morgue. Well, let me tell you, the last place I'm going to visit in an abandoned hospital, if I ever visit that, is the morgue. And tactile encounters with cold spots, touches, and unseen forces. Electrical malfunctions, such as flickering lights, slamming doors, and triggered alarms, add to the unsettling atmosphere. Yeah, okay. This place sounds like a place I don't want to visit at all. Unusual odors ranging from blood and decay to medicinal scents have also been noted. Among the spectral entities, the ghost nurse, who I've read multiple places now about, was a former employee rumored to have committed suicide in the hospital, and that one stands out the most. She's in a white uniform, carrying a clipboard, and she is thought by some to be a benevolent presence aiding the living, while others perceive her as malevolent, intent on causing fear. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that if I saw a ghost nurse, I would be in fear, not, oh, yay, she's gonna help us. Despite its haunted reputation, the hospital remains operational today, albeit with a reduced population of approximately 200 involuntary patients placed there. They go there through civil court commitment actions. So to address overcrowding concerns, a new facility in Gallon, Montana, was inaugurated in 2023. So that's pretty recent. The historic hospital building now serves as the headquarters for the National Center of Appropriate Technology, a nonprofit organization advocating for sustainable living and renewable energy. While the site is open to the public for tours and events, visitors are advised to approach with respect and caution due to the lingering spirits. Listen, if I'm going to go visit someplace and they give you a pre-warning to approach with respect, I feel like it's got to be, pretty common to have the ghosts and things making noise and being seen and being heard. Otherwise, I feel like they wouldn't actually say that to you unless they're, trying to build it up, the fakeness of it. But I don't feel like that's the case in this one. The Montana State Hospital bears witness to a history marked by suffering and tragedy, leaving a mark on both the land and its people. As one of the eeriest places in the state, it invites exploration and contemplation, appealing to history enthusiasts, paranormal seekers, and curious travelers alike. This abandoned hospital in Montana holds a blend of fascination and fear for those willing to delve into its haunted past. In present day, it doesn't sound like the hospital is doing very well now either. Employees at Montana State Psychiatric Hospital failed to properly investigate the death of a patient who was reportedly told to go back to her room and stop being dramatic. After she told staff she was having trouble catching her breath, she ended up dying. Investigators with the Centers of Medicare and Medicaid Services also found that Montana State Hospital in Warm Springs has inadequate staffing, resulting in a lack of patient supervision that led to 113 reported falls on one unit of the hospital from June 2021 through mid-September 2021. So June, July, August, September, 4 months, they had 113 falls. I feel like we're repeating history here. So I don't know that I would want to go to this hospital, and it kind of sounds like there's multiple buildings that were built here, and the older one from the 1950s and earlier is obviously abandoned now. And then it sounds like this new company for the National Center of Appropriate Technology is kind of moved in to that part of it. And then they have the new hospital that doesn't sound like it's doing very well either. But I don't know that I would want to go visit, but I feel like I said, if there's so many reports of things being heard and being seen, I feel like the energy there has to be real. Part of my goals with this podcast is to be able to get more education with EVPs and learning how to communicate or study that part. I think that would just be really awesome to educate myself on. And later in the episode, we're going to talk about some more EVPs. I just think it would be really cool to go to these places and see the response that you can get. So in Season 1, Episode 6 of our podcast, we had Entity Ventures Paranormal on the podcast. And I don't know if you guys remember that episode, but we actually talked to them about, exploring and what things are like as they find things. And I just think that's super interesting because they're proving that there is energy out there. They're proving that these ghosts are still here. And to me, that really just can change the way you think about things. Seeking occupational therapy services for your child in the Wasilla and Palmer area and you're on a waiting list? Clinic setting just isn't cutting it? Too many options or not enough? Wild Free Kids OT may be your answer. With no wait lists and extensive training, experience working with children and adolescents with behavior issues, we offer mobile, community, and nature-based OT where it matters most. You get real results, learning alongside your child and without compromising your way of life. Give us a call at 907-215-4438 or check us out on Facebook or online, Wild Free Kids OT. So, sticking with the history lessons, let's move to Little Bighorn Battlefield. This is also in Montana. So, I don't know if I have a lot of history buffs that listen to the podcast, but Little Bighorn was quite the battle. We're going to cover that. We're going to do a little bit of the history lesson and then go into what you can still hear. Little Bighorn Battle was a genocide, basically, cultural and actual. So, as European settlers encroached steadily west over the Great Plains of America, they wanted the tribes that they encountered gone. At first, it was all about avoidance, making treaties, and keeping away. But as the American Civil War left battle-hardened veterans willing to fight for land, the eradication of the first natives kind of became inevitable. Vast concentration camps were formed. They were called reservations, and they were designed to limit the areas in which the tribes could move. I'm going to try to keep my opinions and politics out of this the best that I can. These were large lands in which the farming was poor and the buffalo couldn't be effectively hunted. Those humans being caught within their boundaries quickly became dependent on food rations from the USA. Within those terms, deals could be struck. More land ceded, language eradicated, rebellions kind of quashed. Then came the issue of the Black Hills of Dakota. Sacred to the tribes who lived around there, people would starve rather than give them up. But there were also gold in those hills. Treaties signed swearing that they were going to be kept special and separate were soon deemed worthless. Miners swarmed over those holy summits, and the U.S. Army protected them. Chief Sitting Bull knew that the Army was coming to herd his Lakota tribe into a reservation. He knew that the Black Hills were being desecrated. He sent messages to the chiefs of tribes already in the reservations, urging a meeting and their combined forces kicking back. The North Cheyenne responded, leaving their reservations in the thousands. When General Custer's troops arrived, they expected to face 800 men, women, and children who would be taken to a reservation or killed. They found themselves face to face with over 3,000 warriors and their families. Sitting Bull's last stand was to become the greatest first native victory against the U.S. invaders. It became legendary. Outnumbered, outgunned, the U.S. Army was massacred on those Montana plains. It wasn't heroic. It was mostly men with an average age of 19 to 22, fleeing terrified up a hill or into a gorge. All who followed Custer were killed where they ran, as were the majority of those who were led into battle by Reno. If ghosts are caused by high emotion felt in a single spot, then Little Bighorn has more than its fair share. Both sides were fighting for their lives and the way of their lives. For those living, working, or visiting the site of the Battle of Little Bighorn, those panic-stricken last moments left more than scars in the American psyche. Some of those men are still running, still screaming, still desperately trying to summon help. Yet others seem to have realized that they are dead. They're quite calm, but still staring in shock. These encounters form the stories from what appears to be America's most haunted battlefield. There at Little Bighorn Battlefield is a visitor center, and the staff claim to have spotted the ghost of Custer himself a few times. Amongst the artifacts and reproductions in the small museum that's there, the figure of a man is regularly seen. He takes a few steps and instantly disappears. Surrounded by so many photographs and artists' representations of Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, it's not difficult to identify the specter suddenly appearing. He's dressed in the uniform in which he died, and he still sports the famous handlebar mustache. Eyewitnesses state that they knew he was around because a chill filled the room. This wasn't just about temperature. A sense of dread permeated all. Those looking up in confusion would see Custer's ghost shaking his head, eyes wide in shock or fear. Then he would take a couple of steps forward and fade. Had he been summoned by the fact that so many of his personal effects are on show there, maybe? Or because so many people are thinking about the circumstances of his demise as they scrutinize the exhibits? I mean, could be, bringing that energy back. Also, could Custer be related to the soldier seen by a visiting academic one afternoon at the center? The professor had packed away his presentation material when he ventured from the conference hall to return some items. They were all genuine artifacts which he had borrowed to enhance all that he'd been telling his audience. As he stepped out with them, he noticed a man in full period U.S. Army uniform standing in a shadowed corner. I have goosebumps while I'm talking about this experience. Assuming it was a reenactor on break, the professor merely nodded in his direction and returned the items to their store cupboard. Whew! Yet the soldier hadn't shifted upon the professor's return, nor had the salutation been returned. Frowning slightly, the academic continued on towards the hall in order to retrieve his own presentation kit, but the incident was bothering him. He turned back in the doorway, just in time to see the soldier striding out of the shadows in the direction of the store cupboard himself. Before the professor could say another word, he witnessed something which sent his blood running cold. The soldier didn't open the storeroom door. He simply passed right through it like it had never been there. Up on Battle Ridge, visitors gain a great overview of the battlefield. Here is where the big memorial stone is situated, beneath which lie the remains of many U.S. soldiers who died at Little Bighorn. Naturally, it's a favorite destination of tourists, and a road runs alongside in order to convey them there. Hence, the cab driver that I'm about to tell you about being on Battle Ridge in the first place. After dropping off his passengers, the taxi man was returning back to base when something quite strange stopped him. For a start, the road had disappeared straight ahead. It didn't take him long to realize he was no longer in his own time. The fact that the Battle of Little Bighorn was occurring in all its stark brutality and horror down on the landscape below was a huge clue. He sat, petrified, gripping his steering wheel, watching it all play out for several long minutes. All the time, he panicked about his own fate. Should his presence be noted, not to mention concerns about how he'd gotten there and how he'd get home again. But as suddenly as the vista had changed, it switched back again. There were plains, empty of all but tourists. There was the tarmac snaking along the ridge. The cabbie didn't go back to base. He shakily edged his vehicle towards the visitor center instead and staggered inside to tell his tale. Whether the staff believed him or not, they could see his utter distress. He was taken somewhere quiet and given refreshments until he was calm enough to make his way back to civilization. Can you imagine? You're driving in your car, dropping these people off at a visitor center, dropping these people off at the memorial stone, and you turn around your car and all of a sudden you're not there anymore. You're in a different time. You're watching all of this happen. I feel like I would be terrified. Dan Asfar's Haunted Battlefields book recounts the strange experiences of a Vietnam veteran and his wife at the site of Battle of Little Bighorn. The couple visited in their retirement as Custer's last stand had long since caught the imagination of Jason Davies. That's not his real name. He had read so much about it. Going there was a dream come true. Yet, from the outset, it was nothing like he imagined. Skeptical about ghosts, as most people are, and not particularly religious, Jason was there for history. As soon as he stepped foot on the battlefield, though, the bizarre events began. At first, it was a sense of extreme unease, then voices at the very edge of his hearing. As the long afternoon closed in, those voices grew louder and more intense. They were speaking over each other, in such number that he couldn't make out what was being said. Even more creepy was the fact that he could see shadows. I feel like this place has so many accounts that it has to be something real there. There has to be some sort of energy left over. I mean, all of those people dying there had to have left something. While researching, I had found a website called mcmsys.com. Now, I'm not sure, I couldn't find the name of the actual person who produced the website, but they had several EVP recordings from Little Bighorn Battlefield, like they had went to visit. And I read through their website, listened to the EVPs, and I'm just going to share that with you. And if you guys want to go to the website and hear all these different ones, you go for it. Again, it's mcmsys.com. Back in the summer of 1999, my family took a vacation out west. As we went through Montana, we stopped at the Little Bighorn Battlefield and Visitor Center. At the time, I had not yet become involved with EVP research. Since that time, I have often wished that I could have known about it so I could have recorded at the battlefield. If you are ever in Montana and you are able, as I am, to sense the presence of spirits, then don't miss the opportunity to visit this incredible place. There was so much spiritual energy there that I could hardly breathe. It was a very powerful place. Anyway, it just struck me the other night. I had my camcorder and filmed quite a bit there on that hilltop where Custer and his men had their last stand. It's an analog camcorder, which means it works exactly the same way a tape recorder does. The only difference is that there are two signals, a video and an audio. I immediately got excited and pulled the VCR tape out of storage to check it out. On the morning that we were there, we were the first ones to arrive. We were all alone for at least the first 20 minutes that we were there before any other tourists got there. So upon viewing the tape, sure enough, there we were, on that hill alone, talking about what a beautiful, silent, and powerful place it was. Nothing has been changed since the battle. No homes, no power lines, nothing. Just a visitor center and a national cemetery nearby. There is only the sound of the soft breeze and miles of prairie grass dancing in the wind. When you look down the valley, you can see the blue of the Little Bighorn River shimmering in the sun where the Indian camp was. So I turned up the TV, put my little recorder there on a chair in front of it, and let it record. When I played it back, I was amazed. It was full of EVPs, and some of them were strong. 3 of them were even audible on the VCR tape. We just never noticed. Many others appeared when I filtered out the sound of the breeze. I expected to hear the voices of soldiers and Indians, and I believe I do, but surprisingly, I hear the voices of women and children also. Then I remembered, there is a national cemetery only about a half a mile away by the visitor center, which contains over 5,000 people. Many of them soldiers from all of America's wars, but some of their families are buried with them as well. So that was from the person who had made the website. I am going to play a couple of them for you. I can't, say that the quality is really good going from one recording to the podcast, but we're going to give it a go. I'm not going to tell you what I hear when I listen to it until after I play it, so that way you have a clear thought. Okay, I'll go ahead and play it again. Okay, so I hear it, and it was confirmed by what the website said, that it's supposed to sound like, looks like rain this evening. I'll play it again and see if you hear it this time. Did you catch it that time? What do you think that one said? It's obvious to me that that one's a littler kid, so think about something that they might say. That last one I even slowed down for you so we could try to hear it a little bit better. But that one to me says, I'm scared. Did you hear it? Okay, so I included the link to this website in my show notes on our website. So that way you can click on it, because I had a little bit harder time finding it just going back to it. I had to actually click on the link that I had previously found. Otherwise, you get this kind of different business website that doesn't have anything to do with EVPs. So for spooky stories, to continue here with this, another woman was sleeping on a settee. I'm not sure what that is, but it's in a house on the Little Bighorn battlefield when she too had a strange experience. This time it was the stone house. The building has had many uses over the years since it was first built in 1894 to house the superintendent of the battlefield. Today, it is home to the White Swan Memorial Library. Back in 1994, it was still being used to provide accommodation for members of staff, which is why this lady was on the couch. She was startled awake in early hours of the morning by footsteps crossing the floor above. This annoyed but didn't particularly perturb her. She wasn't alone in the house. 3 men were occupying the 2 bedrooms on that floor. Assuming that one of them was up to use the bathroom, she simply turned over and tried to go back to sleep. But the individual stirred her again on his route back to his bed. Then again and again. It seemed that the man was pacing backwards and forwards across those boards, nor was he doing so lightly. It was like he was stomping with each step. Plaster was being dislodged from the ceiling. But now, fully awake and wondering why none of the others had been disturbed, she glared upwards. It felt like the house was shaking from that heavy marching. She lay there deciding whether to go up and say something or not, but then there was an almighty bang. She sat bolt upright and turned. The kitchen door had slammed shut. There was no one there to have done such a thing, and the windows were all locked. By now, totally spooked, the woman gathered her clothes and swiftly dressed. She spent the rest of the night sleeping in her car. The next morning, all 3 of the men denied that they stirred at all during the night, nor had they heard the footsteps, though one had awoken at the sound of the kitchen door slamming. Such behavior would not have come as a surprise to anyone who lived there previously. When the upstairs had first been converted into bedrooms, one man had been woken by knocking on a partition door. He'd stared at it from his bed, knowing full well that nobody could be inside that room. It was padlocked from the outside, his side of the door, and there was no other entrance but a locked window. A second round of loud knocking roused his colleague, who was sleeping in the twin bed across the room. They both listened keenly, but no more sounds came. "It's just the boys welcoming us here," concluded his colleague, and rolled over and went back to sleep. During the mid-1980s, the stone house was occupied by park ranger Al Jacobson and his wife Florence. They had several years in which to experience the full range of the haunting, and they did. Personal items would disappear, come back, or be shifted when they weren't looking. Florence once watched a door handle turning, though there was nobody else in the house. Whew, that one gives me goosebumps. They heard the footsteps and the knocking. They became used to hearing someone climbing the stairs with heavy steps, though the staircase appeared empty. Al Jacobson told a local reporter, "One night I was showing some home movies. The apartment upstairs was empty, but I heard someone cross the floor up there. I ran upstairs, but found no one. No one could have got out except by the stairs which I came up. Then there was the chicken incident." Florence, his wife, was thriftily eating a plate of leftover chicken, or at least she was trying. Each time a forkful of meat neared her lips, a loud whistling sounded from the kitchen. It was like the noise made by the kettle when the water is boiled. But her kettle wasn't boiling. It wasn't even on the stove. After several such attempts to consume her chicken, Florence had a good look at it, then a sniff. It belatedly occurred to her that the chicken could be off, that the ghost was evidently trying to save her from a bout of food poisoning. For this reason, and more, the Jacobsons concluded that the presence was friendly, even if they did occasionally wake in the night to see the figure of a man standing at the foot of their bed, or worse, sitting on it. While researching, I found a book, Haunted Battlefields by Dan Asfar. I think I mentioned it earlier. He wrote in there, "In the vicinity of the Little Bighorn Cemetery, those shadows took on the forms of men, running, crouching, sprinting forward. They were right on the periphery of his vision. As soon as he turned his head to see them properly, they faded from view. Mrs. Davies," this is in the book now, "Mrs. Davies heard nor saw any of this. She was already halfway down the hill, assuming that her husband was directly behind her. She turned to see him, ashen-faced, staring wildly around himself. Rushing back up, she spoke to him, and it was like a switch was flicked in the scene. Jason no longer saw any of it. Still shaken, he brushed the experience off. He gushed out an excuse. Perhaps the surroundings had triggered some memory, but secretly he wasn't so sure. It occupied him for the rest of the night. The following day, the couple ventured down to where Major Reno had led his troops across the Little Bighorn River. Passing through the woodland, heading into the valley, both husband and wife felt a sense of dread. Something spooked Mrs. Davies. She would not speak of it then, nor has she spoken of it to this day. She stopped on the track and refused to go down to the river. Mr. Davies had had time to assimilate the strange idea that a haunting was taking place. All of his instincts rang to leave, but it had occurred to him that he might see things that the history books left out. He could hear the gunshots and the screams. He distinctly made out the war cry whoops of the Lakota and the thundering of hooves. He hurried on until he could see the river itself. There was a U.S. soldier standing on the opposite bank. A sorrow-faced man with a shock of red hair and a beard. He stared right back at Jason Davies, but never said a word. After a while, the apparition faded from view, and Jason went back to his wife. All discussion of what happened that day still distresses Mrs. Davies, but the couple don't talk about it anymore. I know we're really going on with the Battle of Little Bighorn, but this one to me is really popular with the EVPs and really popular with the energy, so I just want to keep going. I've got a little bit more, and then we'll change topics. The visitor center sits at the bottom of the Last Stand Hill. Tourists step into the place to escape the heat of the Montana sun. Here they can browse the bookstore or visit the museum. After the tourists have left and the doors are locked, the visitor center had experienced the problem of lights coming on after hours and faint voices calling out. Keeping with the Native American theme, we're going to move to a creature that I've researched about for Montana that I'm not going to pronounce it correctly the first time I know it, but it does have another name, thankfully. So the Native American name is Shunka Warak'in, also known as the Rocky Mountain hyena. I'm going to call it the later so that way I don't end up insulting someone with my lack of pronunciation intelligence. Researching with Atlas Obscura, which is a place that I find a lot of my research, I found the following. It has been given many names over the years, in fact, any name but wolf, although the creature could easily be called a wolf. Perhaps that's because wolves were extinct in the state for about half of the 20th century, but that's a blip in the Shunka Warak'in's reign of terror. Whatever they are known to attack dogs and cows and sheep and anything else served up on a fenced-in platter. If only we had a carcass, we could figure out what this creature is once and for all. Oh wait, we do. It's on display in a museum in Montana. In 1886, in the Madison Valley of Montana, a settler named Israel Amon Hutchins had a problem. Something was attacking his animals and the animals of other farmers and ranchers in the area. Something dark and canine-like that screamed in the night like nothing he had ever heard. I feel like we've covered this before. Maybe skinwalkers?
Dadgum chupacabra.
Oh, that's it. One morning, he awoke to his dogs barking and jumped out of bed to find the canine chasing his geese. The beast had a dark coat, high shoulders, and a slanted back. Hutchins finally got a shot at it, but missed, killing one of his cows instead. The next time he got it in his sights, though, he missed the cow and killed the cryptid. Hutchins traded the carcass to a businessman named Joseph Sherwood in exchange for a new cow. Sherwood was also a taxidermist, so he mounted the creature and showcased it in his Combo Grocery Store Museum in Henry Lake, Idaho. That's a thought. Let's just go to the grocery store and see taxidermy animals. Awesome. He dubbed it as a ringdocus for reason unknown. The ringdocus outlasted Sherwood and was on display at least into the 1980s, and then it disappeared. Dead cryptids can be as hard to find as live ones, apparently. Only physical evidence of the existence of the stuffed ringdocus was a black and white photo of the beast published in 1977 in the autobiography of naturalist Ross Hutchins, the grandson of the original monster and cow slayer. In the photo, the creature looks wolf-like, but not quite like a wolf. Something about the shape of its face and arch of its back is different. The photo was captioned Gaiasticutus, which some have offered as a cheeky name for something fake made to sell tickets. I feel like we're touching back on the hodag here a little bit. The story of the creature and the frustrating disappearance of its corpse continued to circulate. Meanwhile, Lance Foster, a historic site preservationist, paranormal enthusiast, and the member of the Iowa tribe, speculated that the beast could be a Shunka Warak'in, a canid non-wolf beast from Native American lore that would sneak into camps at night and make off with the dogs. The Shunka Warak'in translates to carries off dogs. After one particularly fierce battle with one, in which the tribe was victorious, they took pieces of its hide to place into sacred bundles that they wore during battle to make them as hard to kill as the Shunka Warak'in had been. The name took off after it was used by Loren Coleman in his book Cryptozoology A to Z. So theories on this. Cryptozoologists suggest that the Native American folklore can be explained by prehistoric mammals such as hyenodons, direwolves, members of the subfamily, Borophagyni, which is hyena-like dogs. Others suggest more mundane explanations. For example, between December 2005 through November 2006, an unusual-looking wolf killed 36 sheep and injured 71 more in Macomb and surrounding counties in Montana. It was shot on November 2nd, 2006 in Garfield County, Montana, after killing a grand total of 120 sheep. Initially, Montana wildlife officials were unable to identify the 106-pound reddish-yellow animal. Loren Coleman suggested it was the Shunka Warak'in, but it has since been identified by the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Department as a 4-year-old male wolf with unusually red-colored fur. This creature is also known to have been in Iowa. Eventually, another of Israel Hutchinson's grandsons, Jack Kirby, got on the case. He learned that after Sherwood's museum was shut down, the entire taxidermy collection was donated to the Idaho Museum of Natural History in Pocatello, where it was all put in storage. Soon after that, he learned that one of the taxidermied beasts under the dusty sheets was the Shunka Warak'in itself. It was 4 feet long and 28 inches at the shoulder, dark gray in color with a low head and sloping back. Vague stripes could be seen on its flanks. Kirby was able to convince the museum to loan it to the Madison Valley History Museum in Ennis, Montana, where it's been on display for more than a decade. Kirby took it there himself, although he first stopped at his grandfather's grave to reunite the mortal enemies turned cryptozoology legends. Today, the creature is the museum's most popular exhibit. They just call it the beast. But what is it? Shunka Warak'in of legend? A canine mutant? A wolf-dog hybrid? A dog-coyote hybrid? The Rocky Mountain hyena? Or a hyena hybrid? Canids are extremely malleable crossbreeders, as anyone who has seen a Frenchie pug knows. Or is it just a bad taxidermy mount? Only a DNA test could tell, and all interested parties have decided not to do that. The mystery of the Shunka Warak'in has gone on so long that nobody wants to risk solving it. Before we wrap up this episode, I just want to make it known that while researching, I did find information on a Montana Bigfoot. This is now the third state in a row that had some version of Bigfoot. I just feel like if there's some sort of tree marsh area that doesn't commonly have people tromping through it, the thought of Bigfoot will appear. And if every state particularly has their own version of Bigfoot, it has to be real, right? Well, this episode seemed to get a little bit longer than I expected it to be. I am hoping for some feedback from you guys to let me know if you liked the fact that we did like 3 or 4 main subjects and just focused on them, or if you'd prefer me do like 8 cryptids and only touch on them a little bit. Let me know what you think. That way next week I can kind of adjust the podcast to what you guys prefer better. So thanks for tuning in, and catch us next time.